All right, welcome everyone. Let's go ahead and get into a comfortable position. Just taking a moment to come home to the body. Just let the mind rest in whatever's present with the body, whether it's agitation or peace or whatever's there. Just allowing that to be. If you'd like to let the breath rest, let attention rest on the breath. Can be a good way to start a meditation session. Just very gently. Sometimes there's the feeling that there's a need to control the breath, to make it a certain way. That's not necessary. What we're doing here is watching and letting the breath breathe itself. It's possible that you might notice the mind relaxing a bit. You might notice agitation starting to die down. It doesn't always happen when we meditate, but by being still in the body, by giving the mind something other than thoughts to focus on, the mind will often calm down, relax. Just letting attention rest on the breath. Nothing else needs to be done. Just very gently and very kindly watching the breath as it breathes itself. Meditation is the art of relaxation, not in the sense that you're lying on the beach with a drink in your hand, but in the sense that you're doing only as much as is necessary. Sitting here in stillness and putting only the attention necessary on the breath to remain present, not spending more energy going off in thought, just resting in presence. And at some point during the meditation, you may not need to let attention rest on the breath in order to stay present. If that's the case, you can simply let that go and let the mind open to a wider, more spacious awareness. But always there's a feeling of relaxation, and thoughts or feelings arise. Nothing needs to be done. No effort needs to be expended. They can simply be as they are and go when they go. Just be present. There's a question we might ask ourselves. It's not a question to be answered with words or thought. It's something to be experienced. What would experience be if you had no expectations what meditation should be like? We all tend to have these. We want to sit and have a peaceful mind or quiet mind. We want to feel good. We might feel like we know the trajectory of what a meditation session feels like. What if all those expectations were let go of? What is experience like? Just be present with that. And there's another question we can ask ourselves in the same way, not with words, but through examining experience. What would experience be like if you didn't know how to meditate? If you didn't know what the mind was supposed to do in any given moment? Can you just rest with that? And one final question. Again, something to be experienced rather than thought about. What happens to experience when the sense of being a meditator is let go of? Could be nothing happens. Could be something happens. Just something to try and experience. What happens when there are no expectations about how meditation should be, about how meditation should be done, about who is doing the meditating. Thank you all. I have a couple of quick announcements here. So there's a fundamentals of meditation class going on. It started yesterday, but I imagine you could still join. So this is every Monday for the next 5 weeks, and it's class to understand, prepare, and integrate the foundations of Buddhist meditation practice. And on April 6th and 7th, so not this weekend, but next weekend, Dhammadeepa and Brad Hunter are doing a virtual retreat on exploring how our bodies and minds are designed to engage with the world. On Sunday, April 7th, there is a Sangha lunch at noon. And on Saturday, April 20th, there's a Sangha brunch at 10 a.m. All the announcements. Right. So let's take a moment to settle in here. So I'd like to start tonight. I'd like to start the talk tonight with an analogy. So I like to go hiking. And it's been a while since I've done one of the long multi-day hikes, but I've had it in my mind for many years to maybe one day do the Appalachian Trail, which is this like 2,600 mile long through hike from like North Carolina to Maine or something like that. It's this very long, very arduous thing that I'm sure I'm never going to actually do. I'm just going to dream about it. But this is the basis for the analogy. So one thing that folks who do these long through hikes are very concerned about is weight. So like even like taking an ounce off of their gear weight is like a very, very big thing when you're hiking 2,600 miles. And so here's the analogy. So imagine you're in this like hiking along this trail in this mindset, and somebody comes up to you and they're carrying this rock, and you walk up to them and they hand you this rock and they say, "Here, this is your rock. You take this rock and you put it in your pack and you go on down the trail." You walk for a while and you meet another person and the same thing happens. They give you a rock and they say, "Here, this is your rock," and you take it and you put it in your pack. And you're doing this like the whole way you go down the trail. And this is obviously like very, very silly. Nobody in the history of the Appalachian Trail has ever done that. That makes no sense. But the reason this is a good analogy is because it's there's something we do in real life that's equally as absurd, but we actually do this. And what that is when we meet people, we pick up expectations from them. And expectations are of course not like physically burdensome, but they are very much psychologically burdensome. And so you can understand the way we go through life is we're just like constantly picking up expectations from the folks that we meet. And yeah, I like this analogy just because it shows how absurd that is. And like we don't need to do this. We don't need to take in other people's expectations. We can simply let people think their thoughts and let people have their feelings about things, and not take them on us as something we should do. So it wouldn't be a good Dhamma talk if I didn't have examples. So I will give some examples to kind of flesh this out. So when I was in, I guess it would have been like the 9th grade. So I would have been, it's like 13 or 14 or something like that. There was this girl I liked. Her name was Christy. And Christy and I let me back up to set the stage. The way I would describe myself at that period of time would be, uh, we'll say, extremely awkward. Um, you know, in the intervening years, through like much meditation and personal self-reflection, I've kind of graduated to like mildly awkward, but it was extremely awkward back then. And so I liked this girl, Christy, and we were spending time together, and I recall um, like asking her if she was interested in me, and the answer I got back was, well, no. And actually, she like finds me a little bit annoying, which what happened was I took that rock that she was giving to me and I put that in my backpack, and I carried that around with me for like quite some time, and I eventually let go of it, but it was something that was completely unnecessary. It's she could have her feelings about things and thoughts about things, and I could have just kind of let that be how it was. I didn't have to pick that up. So another example is there's a period of time after college when I wasn't like I didn't have a job, and I wasn't really really in a good headspace. I recall a lot of like playing video games. um, and my parents, of course, like wanted me to get a job, and um, I definitely like took those expectations in into myself, and so I was already not kind of feeling good about my life, but there was also this pressure that I should be doing this other thing. I should be like getting a job and being a productive member of society and stuff, and um, that caused like quite a bit of turmoil in me, and it didn't need to be that way. And there are like many other examples, and that's just kind of to give the flavor of the thing, and it doesn't have to be those kind of like big picture examples like that. We pick up like many like small expectations too. We have um, this whole like zeitgeist of the culture we live in that we pick up from other folks in the same way. And we don't have to pick that up either. That's completely optional. And so I want to say, like when I'm talking about not picking up expectations, well, I don't mean to like ignore people or um, like not feel like their feelings have any validity or anything like that. I just mean like you shouldn't take them in to yourself as something you should do. Um, Sometimes I think about it in terms of like coulds versus shoulds. Like if somebody comes at you with an expectation, if you pick it up as something you could do, like if it works and it makes sense, that's okay. That's not going to cause any harm. It's not going to be any burden. But if you take it on yourself as something you should do and you ought to do, and you get you're going to get upset if you don't, that's where the burden comes in. And so we do this every day, and we do this all the time with everybody we meet. It may be maybe just like a very small rock, maybe even like a grain of sand, but um, even those small things in aggregate can have a lot of weight to it. And the kind of sad thing about the whole issue is that we don't need to. It is something that we can just let go of. Mm. And we can do this in a like a very very deep and very comprehensive way too. It's not just the kind of macro things like somebody says something to you and you feel a certain way about it, but just like you can let all of the expectations you have go. Just let them all go completely. I would have found that pretty difficult to kind of take in or understand it at some point in the past. That wouldn't have it wouldn't have made sense to me that you could set aside everything from like all the advice we get on how to live a good life, about like getting a job and uh, raising a family, and having hobbies and stuff like that, and like how to be a good person. The idea that you could set all that aside and still live and still like function in the world and be happy would be, I don't think I would have bought that in the past, but it turns out you can. It's been quite a revelation to me. The way I think of it is, this is the analogy I have. It's like the way we normally live in the world with all the um, kind of expectations and stuff. It's like it's like playing catch with a robot. So if you throw a ball to a robot, what a robot's going to do is it's going to analyze the position of your arm and compute the velocity of the ball and factor in the crosswind and look up the three laws of motion and stuff like that. And it's going to have this whole structure of logic and expectation and this whole like construct with which to like figure out how to move its hand. But if you throw a ball to a person, the person is just going to like move their hand and catch the ball. There's no thought required. And the way we normally live our lives is like that of the robot. We have the structure of thought and expectation about how we should live and move in the world. But it turns out you can actually just let all that go and just move from a place of intuition. It turns out all those calculations about how to live your life and how to have relationships just can happen by instinct. And the reason we would want to do that is because that we wouldn't be burdened by the expectations and the failure of meeting them. We could just live our lives without this giant backpack of rocks that we're kind of carrying around with each other, carrying around in our path. And so as we go through life and we see ourselves suffering, we see anger come up, or we see greed or fear or agitation, we can ask ourselves, like, what rock am I carrying around here? What is this expectation that that I've gotten from somebody else? Like, where did it come from, and what is it? And we can also ask, do I need to carry this one around? That the spoiler to that is no, you don't. But sometimes it feels like it. Sometimes the expectations we take in, like maybe especially from our parents, like go very deep, and it may not feel like safe to set them aside, but and that's okay. If you don't feel okay setting them aside, you can hold on to them. Just know what you're doing is giving yourself this unnecessary burden, and perhaps in the future you'll be able to set it down. And so asking these questions is helpful because it lets us, by like defining the problem and putting words around it, it lets us like step back and detach a bit from it. But for most of us, that's not enough. Although I will say, I have a friend who describes himself as having a very high executive function, and he is somebody who can, like, once he sees himself doing something like this, he can just look at it and say, this doesn't make sense for me to do this. And often he can just kind of set it aside and not do that again. But I am not built that way. So for most of us, like, we need to do something else, and that's practice. Practice does a number of things that are helpful in this regard. First, it helps us feel better. Like, in general, we feel pretty good when we sit. And when we feel good, we have less need to seek validation or love outside of ourselves. And so when somebody comes up to us with this rock, we don't always need to take it from them. We can feel okay with our own self, with our own situation. It also gives us the experience of feeling less burdened. So, to use the analogy, we get to set aside our pack for a while. When we sit in stillness and we just let things be, we're not being moved around by all the expectations of others. We're just letting things be, and that's a muscle that carries over to when we're off the cushion and out in the world. It becomes a habit. And lastly, as we sit, we start to get glimpses of how of the true nature of reality. And those build up over time. And I think I mentioned last week that when we start to see reality clearly, what happens is not that we like get this great surge of willpower so we can always choose the right skillful means. It's just that when we see things clearly, it never makes sense to do anything other than what's skillful. And so, bringing this back to the analogy, we see how completely absurd it would be to take someone's expectations on us, just in the same way it would be absurd to take someone's rock and put it in our packs. It really does get to be that stark. You just don't do that anymore because it doesn't make sense. We can also think about this in terms of the way we push our expectations on other people. Um, we may not like to think of that. That doesn't, I'm sure that doesn't feel very good, but that's something that we do, and it doesn't mean that we're bad people or anything. It's just the way the world works. Sometimes we push our expectations on others in explicit ways. So we will say something like, I need you to do this, or otherwise I'm going to be upset with you, or something like that. But mostly it doesn't happen that way. Mostly it's kind of implicit. And the way that works is that human beings are very attuned socially. They're very aware of what other people are feeling, and there's this like very strong desire to have others like us. We're just built that way. We're pack animals, and we have like many millions of years of being selected for creatures that survive based on how well others like us. So it's something we're built to do. And what happens when we come to others with our expectations, the way we kind of push that on other people is that we make our affections for others conditional. So when we do something like speak kindly to one group of people and then speak unkindly about another group of people, anybody listening understands that to be in our good graces, they need to be in the first group. And so it's what they're doing is they're picking up the rock that we give to them, and they're understanding that to be liked by us, they need to be a certain way. And the same thing happens when we're kind to one person and unkind to another, when we're kind to a person at one time and then at a later time we're unkind to them. It's the fact that there's something that they feel like they can do to earn our affections, which they're wired to do. So we can think about, in terms of being kind to another person, of course it's always good to be kind, but we can think about being unconditionally kind too, just being kind whatever that person does, or whoever that person is. And doing that is an incredible gift. I've been very lucky in my life to have two people who I feel have treated me that way. And I remember the first woman was like one of my Dhamma teachers, and it was just completely freeing to be. It took me a while to understand that she was treating me that way. Like, it took me a while to understand that I didn't have to like earn her affections, and it was completely freeing to just be able to be me, just to be able to like show up with my practice however it is, and she was just going to be kind to me and give me whatever helpful advice she had. And it was just this great gift, and we can do that to others. I think I was very lucky to have two people like that in my life, and I think most people never have anyone like that in their life. But it's a fantastic gift to give to someone. I want to make one last point. I was having a little trouble with this as I was prepping my talk earlier. I was having trouble like finding the right words to say this, but I'll give it my best shot because I think it's important. So I think it's easy to understand why we might let go of expectations. Like I know we've all had the experience of like trying to be what somebody wants and realizing we don't need to do that, and just letting that go and feeling the freedom that comes from that. So it's understandable in that way, but there's another reason to do it too. it's when we start letting go of a lot of expectations, right? It's harder to see this when you're just kind of just letting go of a little, but when we let go of a lot, what starts to open up is that we start to see that there's a possibility to live life in a fundamentally different way. We see that we can live a life of beauty. And we tend to understand beauty like all wrong. So I think we mostly think about beauty as something associated with like peak experiences, like the famous painting in the museum, or the grand vista on top of the mountain, or something like that. Um, and what happens in those peak experiences is that it's so outside of the ordinary that the voice of the self, the voice, the kind of voice that's like constantly running in your head saying like, oh, I'm too cold and I should be doing work right now, and this person should like me, and da 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 da. This kind of um, constant voice is so shocked by these kind of peak experiences that it shuts up for a bit. And when it shuts up, everything becomes beautiful. And so we misunderstand this. We misunderstand beauty as coming from the peak experiences, but it comes about when the self shuts up, um, regardless of what's present. And so what happens when we start to like let go of these expectations, um, as we do that more and more, there starts to open up um, like gaps in this constant chatter of the self. And when we experience in these gaps, whatever is there is beautiful. It doesn't matter what's there. It can be just the very mundane thing. It can be just the feeling of the sponge when you're washing the dishes, or the feeling of walking along the ground, or hearing the cars outside. It doesn't matter. And so we can live a life just full of this if we start to let go of this stuff. So to bring this to a close, in this metaphor, maybe there's like two ways of moving through life. There's the kind of conventional way where we're walking along this trail and meeting folks and taking their expectations upon us, and it becomes a burden, and we spend our life to a greater or lesser extent kind of like hunched over with this burden, and looking at our feet, and um, spending a lot of time like being upset about the pain we're in, and wondering when this is going to be over, and maybe occasionally like lifting our head and seeing the forest around us. Or we have this other way too, where we can simply set this pack down and walk through life in a free and easeful manner, just enjoying the trees and the sun and the birds and the sky. And that's what practice offers. Sounds very straightforward when I put it that way. That's what I have to offer.